10 unusual people around the world. The world is full of things that you would not believe if you hadn't seen them with your own eyes, and this phenomenon extends to people too. Over the course of history, there have been instances of people with extraordinary differences that some might see as strange and unusual, some of which you've probably seen or heard about through the likes of shows or books like Ripley's Believe It or Not. Well, in today's video, we're going to be going over 10 people that you won't believe existed. Be sure to stick around until the last one to find out what it would be like to never see the person standing closest to you. And hey, if you enjoyed today's video, please be sure to leave a like, comment, and subscribe, and slam that notification bell so that you don't miss any of our amazing uploads. Abdul Bajandar. The first person on our list hails from Bangladesh and happens to suffer from an extremely rare skin disease. The disease is known as epidermodysplasia verruciformis and stems from an immune system deficiency inside of Abdul. This disease is so rare that there have only been around 200 known cases throughout history. It causes the person who has the disease to be very susceptible to infections. It also causes a growth that makes anyone who has the disease extremely recognizable. These malignant skin tumors that grow on Abdul's body due to his rare skin disease tend to look like the bark of a tree to most people who have seen him. So much so that in his community and around the world, he's known as the Tree Man because his arms look like tree branches. These growths began growing about 16 years ago, and since then have caused Abdul to not only quit his job, but he also went through multiple surgeries in an attempt to get rid of the growths. At one point, it said the doctors removed a total of 11 pounds of branch-looking growths back in 2017. Carlos Rodriguez, aka HAFI. Now, you might have seen this next person on the list, as his mugshot would end up making him go viral, with many people believing it had been photoshopped. Carlos Rodriguez, who is better known as HAFI after going viral, got his nickname after his mugshot showed the world that he was literally missing half the top of his skull. And it's not a pretty or funny story how it happened either, and clearly this man is lucky to be alive. At the age of 14, Carlos was apparently driving around his neighborhood, and at the time he was under the influence. It's unclear what drugs he was using, but regardless, he definitely shouldn't have been behind the wheel. During the drive, he would end up crashing into a pole and being launched through the windshield and would then land headfirst on the ground. The impact crushed the top of his head and would result in him losing a chunk of his brain along with the front portion of his skull in the process. Carlos is clearly lucky to have survived the incident and apparently uses his new viral fame to try to tell people about the dangers of driving under the influence. Stan Larkin. The next one is going to blow your mind. Stan Larkin is an American man who has been living for quite some time without a heart. For nearly 2 years, Stan has survived without the #1 organ that a body needs to stay alive. You see, at 23, Stan needed to have an emergency heart transplant. The doctors needed to get his heart out there, but there were no donors available that matched Larkin. But like Iron Man, Stan ended up being implanted with an artificial heart for the time being. And I know what you're thinking, this probably hindered Stan greatly, right? Wrong. The man is still running marathons and staying in better shape than you or me on our best days. He's absolutely a monster. Dean Clifford. Have you ever heard of the term butterfly children? Well, it's a term given to children who are born with conditions that make them extra fragile, like a butterfly. Dean Clifford was born with a condition known as epidermolysis bullosa, or EB. EB is a genetic disorder that leads the person inflicted with it to have extremely fragile skin, much like the wing on a butterfly. About 200 children are born a year with EB, and Dean is setting a great example for all of them. Dean is in his 40s and has managed to overcome many challenges in his life, many of which include dealing with being in pain. Troy James. You may recognize this next person from movies like Hellboy or TV shows like The Flash. Troy James is a person who grew up being teased and antagonized by the fact that his body was able to twist and bend like no other. Troy has since become a world-renowned contortionist who can make his body bend and twist and fold like nothing you've ever seen before. He's slowly becoming known as the king of horror creatures in the cinema industry, and it's clear he's using his uniqueness to make a name for himself. Francisco Domingo Joachim. Francisco Domingo Joachim gives a new definition to the term big mouth. He's one of the largest mouths in the world and has since made a name for himself through the wacky faces he can make with it on the internet. Without stretching his mouth, he can open it as wide as 6.5 inches. If he wanted to, he could fit an entire apple in his mouth and then some. He's proven this by fitting an entire can of Coke in his mouth while spinning it around with his tongue for a photographer. Romario dos Santos Alves. Romario dos Santos Alves was a bodybuilder whose muscles seemed to be reminiscent of the Hulk's. He didn't go about getting those giant muscles the practical way though, and instead decided to inject himself. Not with steroids though, no. Romario ended up injecting himself with a cocktail mixture of oil and alcohol directly into his arms. This potentially deadly mixture was used to make his arms swell up to a massive 25 inches, but it didn't come without cost. It's said that the man almost needed to have both his arms amputated after injecting himself. This led him into a deep depression, and the fact that the children in town were afraid of him certainly didn't help. Romario apparently attempted suicide after realizing what he'd done to himself. Jessica Cox. This next person might be the most interesting pilot I've ever heard of. Jessica Cox is someone who managed to get her pilot's license all without having any arms. That's right, using only her feet. She's not only able to fly the plane, but she personally runs all the diagnostic checks and maintenance on it before each flight. Being born without arms, Jessica was forced to learn to do literally everything with only her feet. And I tell you what, she's more coordinated with her feet than most of us are with our hands. Myrtle Corbin. Myrtle Corbin was a woman who was born in the 1860s and lived to be about 59 years old. She became a sideshow performer after it was clear that there was nothing that she was going to be able to do about her deformity. You see, Myrtle was born with dipegus, which means that she was born with two pelvises, each with its own set of legs. Her inner set of legs were much smaller than the pair she used to walk on, but it's said that she could move the inner legs freely. They were just too weak to support her weight. Stefan and Tyler Delp. Stefan and Tyler Delp have spent their entire lives together, but have never been able to make eye contact with one another. The pair of twins were born conjoined at the head, with one of the twins facing one way while the other faces the opposite direction. This makes normal tasks very difficult for at least one of them. As for one to walk forward, the other would have to walk backwards. This didn't stop the pair though, as they've grown into young adults who say they wouldn't have their lives any other way. As you can see, the world is just full of amazing people who think that a happy life is all about perspective, and you can truly do anything if you put your mind to it. Who was the most inspiring person that we mentioned in this video? Be sure to let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button to stay up to date with all our uploads. See you next time.